We hear about the struggles that immigrants in America face every day, but what about the success stories? Bruce Ortega Terran, or better known by his friends and family as Bruno, was a Mexican immigrant living in Los Angeles. And although he passed away in 2010, the legacy he leaves behind highlights a story of true perseverance and one man risking it all for a better life across the border. Bruce Ortega Terran was born in Chihuahua, Mexico on October 24, 1924. When he was a toddler, his family moved to Juarez, Mexico, where they lived in an adobe house with dirt floors. Bruno graduated from high school when he was just 16 and worked with his father as a builder for 9 years. Finally, at the age of 25, Bruno immigrated to the U.S. in search of opportunities.
To have a better life. Very poor, no work. He was very young, so he wanted to contribute to the family.
He made his way to Los Angeles by paying a stranger for a ride. He got to LA with little money and only the clothes on his back, and he didn't know a lick of English. He also deeply feared he would get deported.
He came here illegally. He used a coyote to get over and paid him and spoke no English at all and depended on the coyote to translate for him.
When he first got to LA, America was anything but glamorous and not what Bruno expected. He moved into a crowded apartment that he shared with several other undocumented immigrants.
It was like a 1-bedroom apartment, and there were probably like 11 guys living in that room, in that apartment. And he said they would just sleep on the floor because they had nowhere to go.
Not long after arriving, he got a job as a dishwasher at the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood. But this didn't cut it for Bruno. He wanted more than a job in the back of a hotel, and his deepest desire was to learn English.
He decided later in life to get a job where he'd be around people speaking English so that he would hear it and be able to practice it.
However, in order to have a better job, Bruno had to obtain a false identity and use fake papers.
He had an alias. He didn't use his real name. And he had probably from the coyote purchased an identity. I think it was Jesse.
Under his false identity, Bruno began working as a janitor at a company that built construction cranes, and he quickly moved his way to the top. Eventually, Bruno began painting the cranes, but soon after, he became a welder, and then he learned how to read and interpret blueprints, which got him promoted to lead supervisor. Even though Bruno was successful at work, he still faced barriers he couldn't seem to get over.
The language. Because he did finish high school, so he had the math, the reading, he could do all that. In Spanish, he had to learn English, and he had to learn how to read in English.
Lucky for Bruno, at age 26, he met a 21-year-old Mexican-American girl named Rosie Hernandez. She began to teach him English, and eventually the couple fell in love. However, Bruno was still having a hard time learning the language.
It took him so long to learn English is because he was embarrassed by his English.
So he didn't want to practice.
So he didn't want to practice. For years, he'd do to my mom, to us, ask them this, ask them that. Finally, my mom said, you know what? You need to ask them. You can speak. They understand.
Gradually, Bruno improved his English and even took some ESL night classes at a local high school. After only 3 months of dating, Bruno and Rosie got married, which meant Bruno got his green card and became an American citizen. But he wasn't too eager to give up his Mexican citizenship. Priscilla says her dad was known as Mr. Mexico because he never wanted to give it up. She says he was proud to be Mexican and was still connected to his Mexican roots, celebrating every Mexican holiday with parties full of Mexican food, music, and dancing. It was a piece of him he never wanted to let go of.
I think a little bit of it is pride, pride, and he always would say that you never know what's going to happen. He didn't want to give it up.
Eventually, the couple had 4 children, Peter, Gilbert, Bruno Jr., and finally, their youngest daughter, Priscilla. At this point, Bruno was making good money and even had enough to send some to Mexico for his parents. He held a position of authority at the company, and the position required many years of experience and at least an American high school diploma, but Bruno did well. Even though his English was poor, he was respected by his peers and co-workers.
Very dedicated. Sometimes even put his work before his family. just because it was hard to get a job in Mexico. So once he did work here, it was like he was very dedicated, hard worker, loyal.
Priscilla says there were times she wouldn't see her dad for over a week because he worked so late into the night and would start work again the next day before she even got up for school. Many of Bruno's coworkers agreed that he was an outstanding worker, especially the other immigrants he befriended. Throughout his life, he encouraged other immigrants he met to come out of the shadows and to not be embarrassed. He shared his story and was open and honest with them.
Some of his friends at his job, knew who he was for real, Bruno, and then his fake name of Jesse. Sometimes when they call him, can I speak to Jesse? And I used to go, who? And then they go, Jesse. I go, you have the wrong number. And then they'd laugh and they go, no, we're looking for Bruno.
Priscilla says she understands why her father used a false identity and fake papers, that it was something he had to do to better his life and to support the family he always dreamed about having.
He was determined to learn something, to do something, to provide for his family, to put food and clothes and my dad wanted a big family, so he knew he had to work. Right. And he didn't want my mom to work. He wanted her to take care of the kids.
Priscilla says that although her dad illegally immigrated into the country, that he wasn't a criminal at heart.
Law-abiding citizen. Yeah. I mean, he, other than coming across illegally, but when he was here, I mean, he never went to jail. I mean, he was just pretty much on the straight and narrow.
Bruno lived with his family in Carson until he passed away in December of 2010 at 86 years old. Although there were many factors working against Bruno, Priscilla says he made his dream a reality. A poor boy from Mexico living on dirt floors chased his dreams and built a successful life for himself and his family in America. Priscilla says her dad is an inspiration to any immigrant going through similar situations and that she'll always remember him as a humble, hardworking person who always saw the best in every situation.
He never complained. I mean, he never complained. He grew up in a adobe dirt house and then came here, bought his own house. Yet he never complained. He got up and went to work every day. He just never complained. He was always happy. And just, told me to work, go to school. The most important thing, go to school. That's why I went to college and I finished, because of my dad.